Hello everyone, just a quick video. I got some questions about my expected value profiler, and so I thought I'd just walk through that a little bit. Now, it's I don't have a website or anything right now. I guess I should fix that. But what I've done is I've pinned this tweet to the top of my Twitter profile, and if you click on the link, it takes you right to my wide receiver database, which has college market share as well as NFL landmarks for those players for all rookies from 2014 to 2017, this year's class, that I have in my database, if you're interested in exploring that at all. But it's also got this info and other links tab, which just gives you a link. This is where I put them on all my tools and sheets, but this is where I put links to the various things I have available that I've worked on that I think could provide value to fantasy players this year and moving forward in Dynasty and Redraft. Now, where is it? RedZone expected value is my EV profiler. So if you just click on that link, it takes you straight to where I've been posting pictures of expected value based on over or under producing and touchdowns in the red zone. The first tab here, as you can see, has got it broken down by receptions, rushing attempts, and also passes. And then I've got a sum column, just to make it easy to sort for running backs who have positive or negative values in receiving and rushing. I thought that might be helpful. I'm not sure how helpful it is with quarterbacks, where they sometimes have rushing and passing positive or negative numbers. Dak Prescott, for example, gets dinged as due the most touchdown regression, but that's largely based on the number of touchdowns he scored, and I'm not sure the league average, as I'll explain how this is based, what this is based off, works well for quarterbacks, because I didn't do it by position specifically. Okay, so first thing to know is that the method I use for this is actually, what words that showcased or displayed or taught by TJ Hernandez from 4for4.com. He's got a video on Roster Coach that showed me literally how to do it, and I've just been doing it ever since. And I find it a good way to search for potential regression back to the mean in touchdowns year over year. Now, these numbers, what do they mean? What does 23.9 mean for Dak Prescott in rushing? That means he scored 23.9 fantasy points more than he should have based on the amount of rushes he had in the red zone. Now, that also breaks down within the red zone as well, as I'll explain in a little bit. But the important thing to know is that these 30 points here, this 30 number, those are fantasy points. And remember, he scores 4 fantasy points per touchdown and 6 fantasy points per rush. So you can break that down into he scored 1 extra passing touchdown than he possibly should have based on how many times he threw it in the red zone and where he threw it. But he also scored 23 points more than expected based on his rushing attempts in the red zone based on where he rushed from. But again, where he's a quarterback, this number's a little suspect, for me at least, as you'll see in a bit. What that means is that the green numbers are bad for 2018 and the red numbers are good. Because if you've got a green number, you overproduced. You had more points than expected. Whereas if you have a red number, like Julio Jones down here somewhere, or even LaShawn McCoy, that means you scored fewer touchdowns than expected based on where you had your receiving targets, your rushing attempts, or your passing attempts. Alright, so that's basically how to read this summary of what players are looking like in touchdowns versus league average from 2017. And it's calculated fantasy points specifically because we're playing fantasy. This isn't an NFL tool breaking down the game. This is breaking down the game within the game. So how is that calculated? Well, again, I really recommend you watch TJ Hernandez's video. He's the one who taught me this, and he's the one who, I assume, came up with it. And it's a really good video. So I'm not going to break down the process entirely, and not nearly as well as he does, but I thought I'd show you a little bit how to use the overall numbers, or what goes into the overall numbers that I've been posting since people have been asking me every now and again. It's not like a horde of questions, I know, but it's an excuse to make video, right? So if you click on the 2017 breakdown tab, this is where these numbers come from. This is breaking down the 2017 season, how much opportunity they had, and how many touchdowns they produced on that opportunity. And essentially what it does is calculate the expected value, or the EV, or expected points, call it what you want, but I call it EV because that's what TJ Hernandez had it as, compared to their actual value. Now the actual value is just how many touchdowns they scored times 6, so you get the fantasy points for the touchdowns they scored. The expected value, as I said, is in this case, receptions times the success rate broken down by yard line, so between the 20 and 16, the 15 and 11, the 10 and 6, and the 5 and 1 inside the red zone. So what I did is I calculated how often players scored a touchdown when given a target inside the 5-yard line over the last 3 years. And then all I do is I times their targets by that number, and that gives me their expected value. Now the one that this summary tab gives you is the plus minus number. So what that is the expected value minus the actual value. So if you take in this case Alex Collins' expected value based on his targets away from his actual value, which is 0 because he scored no touchdowns on those targets, then you actually get minus 2.6. He should have had on average 2.6 points, and I know you get 6 points for a touchdown, but it's just the way it calculates it, and it makes sense when you think about it just a little bit. And he should have had 2.6 touchdowns based on his target. So really he shouldn't have had a touchdown based on that 3-year average, only having one target inside the 15-yard line and one target inside the 10-yard line. Just those 2 targets at those distances really shouldn't result in a touchdown, and they did not. So he's not getting dinged very hard for not having that touchdown. And the same process goes for rushing numbers, where they got rushing attempts versus how many touchdowns they scored on those attempts compared to the league average, and then the expected value minus the actual value gives you whether they over or underperformed in terms of fantasy points with that opportunity. Now this is a lot more flexible and sensitive to what actually happened in 2017, because remember, if you just did it in the red zone, which I've seen a lot of regression based on, like this player had this many targets or this many targets in the red zone and only scored 6 touchdowns or scored 54 touchdowns, and that can't happen again. Well, that might provide an overall view of which players may be prone to regression. By breaking it down by the yard line, you get a lot more accurate view of if they over or underperformed based on their opportunity and where that opportunity came on the field. Because that is intuitive, right? A target inside or a rushing attempt inside the 5-yard line is more likely to result in a target or a rush attempt than one that you get inside the 20. And so it just accounts for that. And I really like the methods of that. It uses, I use, and TJ Hernandez breaks down how to use Pro Football Reference to get all of this data. It's very simple using the Playfinder tool, Playfinder app tool, whatever is the preferred name for that, I'm not exactly sure. And then it's just a matter of going through the different yard lines and being careful. As I mentioned last week, I had a flaw. What it was I was looking up in my master file, I was looking at the targets from the players below instead of the players actually on the line. But that's neither here nor there, because I fixed all that now with a lot of cursing, but still. And then what you get is just the expected value over or under based on all that opportunity. And again, I've already broken that down into a neater table where you can just compare all 3 for every single player from 2017. What I also have in this sheet, though, is actually historic Red Zone EV. I went back and calculated it from 2016, 2015, 2014, and that gives you somewhere to look up how, because remember, this is based on a league average. So when you look, like I was saying about Dak Prescott, is that really fair since he's a quarterback? Or one thing you can do is just go to the historic Red Zone and maybe look at quarterbacks, right? Quarterbacks generally over or under in rushing. if there's a pattern or a trend there, or if Dak Prescott's particularly got a trend, you can start to evaluate this number even further. For example, Julio Jones, who's often mentioned as someone who always underperforms in the red zone, and that's typically true. If we look at his 2017 overall number here, where's Julio? Right here. He's got a minus 23. He should have had 23 extra points based on his opportunity in the red zone in 2017. So that would mean he's due some regression. But let's go to the historic tab, look for Julio, if I can spell his name, and look at where he generally is. And what we see is the last 3 years, he's also been underperforming in the red zone. Now, as Josh Hernsmeyer has pointed out numerous times, touchdowns are all basically noise, even though regression's a real thing, because this is neither here nor there. It doesn't say anything about Julio. Julio can score touchdowns in the red zone, and he's still a fantastic wide receiver. But ignoring that much broader argument about touchdowns, also notice that Julio's underperformance is to the tune of a whole touchdown or slightly less than a touchdown in the last 3 years. Now compare that to 2017, missing 23. Now, one of the reasons for that, as we could see in the breakdown tab, is that he got a lot more opportunity. Sorry. He got a lot more opportunity last year, and you can see he got 19 total targets, and here's the breakdown of where he had them, and still only caught that 1 touchdown on red zone targets. And so that's partly why it's so high, but that also doesn't matter. While he normally underperforms, this is an excessively large underperformance based on his opportunity. And again, that's not because of the player, that's because of variance in the nature of touchdowns. That's what I think regression kind of tells us, and the history of touchdowns kind of tells us. So that should mean that Julio Jones is due at least some of this regression. Is he going to get all 4 of those touchdowns extra next year? No, that's not really what regression means. It just means that he shouldn't suffer such bad luck or such bad variance when he gets red zone targets in 2018. So that's a positive sign for Julio, and we run the same process just on these tabs, looking at the historic data and then looking at 2017, trying to understand where it comes from. I also have this tab, which, this is 12 minutes long. I'm not going to blather on about it too much longer, but what I did is I took the top 24 wide receivers, and I believe that was in ADP at the time rather than overall fantasy finish in excuse me, in 2017. So these should just be the receivers that apparently were the most interested in at a certain point according to ADP this offseason. And then I showed their red zone EV, so their receiving red zone EV, which again is in this initial summary. It's their reception expected value over or under the average. And then I broke down their target share using FF statistics data, ffstatistics.com. And again, you've got the reference over here, because referencing where all this comes from is very important to me. And I showed the percentage of targets they got in the red zone inside the 20-yard line, and then the percentage of targets they got inside the 10-yard line, because FF Statistics makes it very easy to get that, as well as their market share of targets, receptions, and yards. And so it's just another way of looking at whether you think these over or under performances in terms of touchdowns, where they might have come from. Was it their opportunity? Was it just variance, or is it something innate to the player? I have my own ideas on that, but my sheets really aren't about giving you the answers so much as giving you the data or the numbers and letting you decide for yourselves. So yeah, I think that's all the tabs in here. Obviously, we've got this tab in here as well, so you could then go explore the running back database or the college market share database, players that haven't declared yet. That's broken down by year, not age, though, because I don't have their birthdays yet. I've got a tight end one that I'm still trying to build, actually, and a few other tools that hopefully some will find useful or not. So yeah, that's a running back profile. Hopefully that's a decent explanation. When you try and write it out, I find it becomes very wordy and hard to explain the breakdown of targets and receptions and yards. And so I was hoping maybe a video about TJ Hernandez's process that he has a video explaining how to do it might explain more of the results from it that I'm posting and using in articles at the moment. Alright, thanks for checking it out if you did. Hope it was not terribly boring if it wasn't terribly helpful. Actually, I hope it was just the opposite of both those, I guess. Anyway, thanks again. Talk to you again another time. Thanks.